Great to see you in person. It's fantastic to be here. I run Landmark's digital tech practice, mostly focus on consumer. We do some B2B. It's really nice to get the nod to the Nerd Prom. I don't get trotted out to places like this too often, so thank you for having me. It's also weird to do a panel not inside my basement home office in Baltimore. It's also weird to do a panel with my pants on. So like all these adjustments that we're going through. Panelists, let's come on up here. I'm done with my opening spiel. Yeah, we have Nate, by the way. I haven't seen Nate.
Nate's going to jump in.
Okay, Nate's going to come in later, but great to have Karen, Ken, Steve on. Delivering digital content through data-driven insights. We're going to do an intro. I want to hear what you all have been up to. I think everyone's just kind of curious to hear what you've been doing recently, maybe over the last couple of years, and if you want to throw in what this topic maybe means to you, and then we'll get going from there. Why don't we start with you? And I heard you've been doing some touring, so maybe you want to start with that.
Yes, first I have to say I apologize. I am going to be bugging out a little bit early because I have to run down to Camden to go see Pearl Jam tonight.
All right.
And that is not your first Pearl Jam concert this month?
No, I saw him in Madison Square Garden, London, both nights, Prague, Budapest, Amsterdam. Oh yeah, and Oakland.
All this year?
All this year.
And you all thought you've been having a fun year.
Yeah. I'm Kay Swift. I'm the VP of IT for Penske Media Corporation. If no one knows who they are, they actually own some really iconic publishing and media brands like Rolling Stone, Billboard. On the fashion side, Variety, Women's Wear Daily, things like that. And what they've been up to during the pandemic was acquiring these companies. So for me, I have to figure out how to kind of put all of them together under one platform or as little platforms as possible.
Sounds like fun from a data perspective. All right.
Yeah.
What have you been doing?
Well, Ken Corvo, I'm with Omnicom Media Group, and probably we're working together in the background over there and with many of the media organizations. And I say there hasn't been a dull moment in the last 3 years as we've accelerated our journey on the digital content side, the digital creative side, and really all about the data side. And you know, where we've started to play in the space is more around being a broker on the data than an owner of the data. And that has really created a niche for Omnicom Media Group in that fact, right? So we're not really trying to own the data, but we're connecting the data points. So a lot of partners like Snowflake and things like that have played into our ecosystem, but also the power of what we can now bring to the table without being sort of anchored to one particular data set. So that's kept me busy on that side. And then I have to say the first trip that I went on was this summer to Asia. I was there for 2 weeks. I haven't traveled in maybe 3 years, right around 19 or so. And coming back, I said, man, I don't know if I can do that trip again. That's a long trip. So getting back on the road again is a journey.
Steve, go ahead.
Steve Mills, CIO for iHeartMedia. I've been at iHeart about 7 years, which is a long time in this job. And I would say most recently, following up on the long time thing, I've been seeing real change in the way that people work at iHeart, really kind of for the first time, because some things take a long time to do. Radio's been around a long time. You guys may or may not know this, but WOAI, which is our talk radio station in San Antonio, will be 100 years old next week. So that's pretty old. And historically, radio was about connecting studios to transmitters with T1 lines across town and that sort of thing. And it's kind of frozen in time. It's been probably 30 or 40 years since there was a meaningful technology change in radio, but it's happening now. And it's transforming the radio product from being that crosstown thing to being digital data, songs and ads and stuff people say that sort of get mixed in the cloud. Like we can upload tracks now out of studios, create the audio product in the cloud, and then play it out anytime we want to. And so it blurs the boundary between things like streams and podcasts and broadcasts and turns it into really personalized on-demand audio content, which is a big, big change. And that stuff's landing now. And I think COVID's been an accelerant for that because it kind of forced us to rethink notions about where content had to be generated and what could and couldn't be done in different places and those sorts of things. And that's kind of helped break down, I think, some culture walls and some muscle memory barriers, let's say.
Let's build on that before I go into kind of privacy and compliance. Going back to you, Ken, and then we can work around. COVID, how has it changed or affected the relationship you've seen between data and content?
Well, I think going what Steve was just saying is content is now being created in so many different places. So that really was a spark that has happened. I think what we have seen on the media side is not just about the traditional content, but who are the influencers, right? How do you find those influencers and really partner with them in ways that we weren't doing 3 years ago, right? And I think that is one of the, probably from our perspective, the biggest transformations that we've seen over the period.
Yeah, and for us, we really realized that we're just not a media and publishing company. We are a content company. You have like a publication like Variety that has been around for 100 years. That's a lot of content that we have. Rolling Stone, we can kind of go down the list. So we are a content company, and what we're looking at is how do we take all this data and kind of pull it together, and then what is the second life of it after publication?
So you're talking about pulling data from different places, influencers, endless amounts of channels. So let's talk about the current strategy or how you're dealing with the current environment around GDPR, CCPA, compliance. That has to be a factor in what you're trying to do with just these endless amounts of channels pouring in content for you to then turn around and put out in a smart way. Start here with Steve.
Yeah, I mean, privacy's coming from all angles. I was hoping for something national. Doesn't look like it's coming. It looks like we're going to get 50 flavors here in the U.S., but it's essential to what we do, both from an advertising value perspective, because we want to put ads in front of people that are meaningful to those people and that will resonate with them, and we got to know something about them to pull that off. And then on the other end, we want to be able to tell advertisers what happened when a campaign runs, and that's always the big challenge in broadcast. So first-party data is a really big deal to us. I think we're struggling with educating, especially at the front lines, our employees about what we can and can't do, and what data is important and what's not, and what steps we have to take. And we have a lot of work to do, I think, on that front. But one of the interesting things that's happened recently with privacy law, and I'm not sure what all this means, but employees are now becoming in scope for privacy in a pretty big way, and that's a change for us. We're having to think from an infrastructure side about how do we treat things like corporate email as kind of PII, because we have responsibilities now after employees leave the company. So that's a new dimension for us.
So you're kind of like a conductor. You're orchestrating data, bringing it in, pushing it out. How do you kind of deal with keeping it all kosher?
As Steve said, first-party data, that is exactly where, that's where the power of the shift is happening, right, is really into the first-party data. As I also mentioned, we're now trying to look at things as more of an orchestrator. So if we're not moving the data out of its initial place and we're combining it in the right ways without getting down to that granular level, that's another area that we're continuing to grow in. So, partnering with our clients and getting their first-party data, working with the different apps, for example, that are out there that people are signing up for and willingly participating in there. They're giving you their first-party data, and so we're combining those pieces together. But it's really shifted the way we're looking at this today.
Has it, just a quick follow-up, and then we'll get to Kay, how has it changed the way you or your clients engage with the consumer to make sure that they're getting that opt-in, right? Obviously, getting that first or zero-party data is
well,
the
think
key to
about all the
this.
growth in the streaming media applications in the last 2 years, right? I think that's kind of where you're seeing the path. I think many of our clients are inventing their own applications that's bringing a value to the client, but now it gives them another channel to get those data points that they can't generically get anymore. Whether it's McDonald's, a Home Depot, whether it's Nissan and you have an app for your car, things like this. So they're inventing ways to get to that level of data that then allows the messaging to be targeted. And then I think that's the biggest challenge when you're bringing that targeted to now iHeart messaging, right, or the digital content you want to display out there. How do you get back to that targeted level?
Yeah.
First party data is everything, 100%. And for Penske, they've built a couple of custom apps for us to really kind of deal with it. And GDPR was really like a game changer, that they kind of looked at that of the roadmap of what was to come. So they really started building most of their data privacy practices just within all the different brands around GDPR, even though CCPA and things like that wasn't even in place here. And then for me personally, I come from a cybersecurity background. I actually was in law enforcement and worked for Attorney General's office and in a law firm. So in a media perspective, when I kind of look at what regulation-wise is not as stringent as what I'm used to. So I'm able to kind of let the strings loose a little bit. So for me, it's a little bit different.
Do you both feel the same way?
Yeah, I think it's going opposite, but see, again, we've been in the media where it's been very open and lax in the past, so, it is
Law
it's funny.
enforcement
Yeah,
is like this.
Right.
Right, sure, obviously, yeah, so it's just the perspective's a little different.
Yeah, it's new discipline for us because what it looks like, we're in 160 markets across the U.S., and in the past, it hasn't been uncommon for someone in a local market to stand up a server and start a jobs board, for example, and collect data that would now be sort of viewed as radioactive, and it's just not a thing. So teaching those people to think differently about data is a big thing for us. One other thing that I think is coming in some form is a transition from the sort of vibe that we're going to collect your data so that we can learn things about you and maybe sort of spy on you to, if you give up data, we'll give you access to things you couldn't otherwise have, right? And maybe create experiences for you that you sort of merit based upon the fact that we have this relationship now, and make it attractive really to consumers and listeners to get
Let's build on that, because that was something that we had discussed, and in conversations I have with my colleagues in marketing is incentivization, getting folks to opt in, dangling carrots. How have you seen that play out for your clients, and how are they getting creative? Do you have any specific examples you could speak to?
I don't. I'm not sitting that close to some of the client initiatives on that side, so I don't have an example I can share.
Okay, yeah, curious. Anything that you've seen?
I'll throw out a hypothetical. One of the interesting things I see happening is stuff that felt maybe a little unrelated a couple years ago, but beginning to converge. So last week we announced iHeartland in Fortnite, and then Saturday night we did a Charlie Puth concert at iHeartland in Fortnite. And a lot of people showed up virtually, and their avatars were dancing in front of the virtual stage and that sort of thing. It's not a huge leap. So underpinning all of that is the blockchain and the notion of tokenized communities. And so it's not a massive stretch to me to imagine, for example, digital swag that's really NFTs of some sort that are exclusive to people that have a certain relationship with us. And that's not here yet, but you can sort of see the path to it, to these things all converging in whatever the metaverse is going to be.
Interesting. Okay, let's take a step. So obviously we have to glean that data, and then it's about connecting the data to be smart in the way we're engaging the consumer. So how are you bridging that? I mean, I have a question down here that's about AI, ML, right? And I feel like AI is almost like a dirty word at this point. If you sell on AI, someone's going to look at you funny. It's like AI washing. Do we use AI washing as a term yet? Can we start that here? Yeah. So, but again, it is that bridge between data, smarter content, smarter engagement, ad engagement, content level engagement. Start with UK. How are you bridging it?
Well, first I would start with that. Obviously, when you look at AI and ML in that marketplace, there's definitely been a lot of improvements over the past years, definitely with tools. For us, at least for Penske, we've looked at this and we're kind of on the fence. So we do have some things in place more on internal side, so we can kind of look at our analytics to see our engagements, whether it's with a particular brand, particular writer, article, whatever the case is. Are we getting our SEO? Are we getting the hits across Google Analytics, our web pages, everything? So we can look at that pretty much up to the second. But overall, we at least have gauged that our audience still value our editorial process and how we are actually providing our articles and things like that. So it's still in flux, basically.
Ken, what about you?
Yeah, I would say this is probably an area that's continuing to grow for us. We're really putting our resources around this because we have so much data and information that we're dealing with and working with to help us optimize the audience that we're trying to go after. So it's still probably in the experimental phase, but definitely much more of an investment today or the last couple of years than it was previously in how we're attacking the data. So for example, we have this partnership with Google, and we're working with some of their AI capabilities and running some models in order to really understand, based on around a particular client, their data set that they've given us that we can run against some of the market data that we have. So we're definitely seeing the move in that direction. I think it's still in its infancy, and especially how we're approaching it. We've talked about it from a sort of almost like a mutual fund, right? So where we get a few of our clients into the program and really trying to help drive that level of technology and really train the models. And that's a piece of what we're in that journey today.
Okay. How are you leveraging this kind of tech to create that bridge?
Yeah, I like calling it models and not calling it AI and machine learning necessarily.
Okay.
But in several places. So inside the company, 10,000 employees, a lot of them do all day what I would describe as administrivia type work. And there are several different versions of that. There's a team called the traffic team that does optimal ad placement. We all know it's not really optimal. Humans don't do a very good job of that sort of thing, but software does. And I've got software that's generally better at it than they are, and I can prove it with math, right? So that's allowed us to bring costs down, but it's also taken a lot of, let's say, low value, repetitive human work out of the world. And so now software can sort of make a first cut at optimal ad placement and let people deal with exceptions, which they are much better at. And there's a version of that in the music world as well, which is producing playlists for what goes out over the air, right? And we actually know quite a bit now about what people like and what they don't. About 15% of our listeners, 35 million or so a month, are on the iHeartRadio app. And we know what they like, and we know what they thumbs up, and we even know when they turn the volume up on their handset. So we collect a lot of data about music that, again, can tell our programmers or can help our programmers to do high value work and spend less time on administrivia. The software can produce an initial playlist for some genre, for some station, and then a programmer can step in and make it local and make it the right thing. And so that's a pretty big
That's
impact.
great, and I'll let you start with this one. And it's a follow-up, really. Is personalization, is that, it sounds real to you. Is it real, or is it still aspirational in terms of how you can, again, bridge the data and get to the individual?
It's real, and it's closer and closer to the endpoint. So we've been doing that for a while on the iHeartRadio app. If you pick what we call a digital station, which might be the Silver Sun Pickups station, right?
Sure.
The songs that are selected for that playlist are based upon similarity, whatever that means in a sort of a fuzzy way, to Silver Sun Pickups, but it's also mapped to what you typically like to listen to. And so that is a thing that is more and more sophisticated. And I found this when I started with the company. I listened to the product quite a lot to become familiar with it, and I found after 10 or 12 thumbs up, I was thumbs upping every new song they played, right? So eventually the app got me and sort of tailored music to
You should have said
me.
Pearl Jam. I don't know
Yeah,
how you
you
feel
should.
about Silver
I
Sun
should have said
Pickups.
Pearl Jam. I'm sorry. for
Interesting
that.
choice. Silver Sun Pickups
Just
are
don't
good.
share your app with the kids, right? Because man, mine's blown up, and I'm like,
Totally.
I don't
Sure.
listen to that.
Totally. Yep. That's
For
for
you,
really
personalization, real, aspirational still?
Well, I think our space is very difficult to get to that personalization space, right? Because with all the rules and regulations around it, I think the latest ruling is 50 or 100 identities. You can't get below that number, right? So you can't really get to a personal, but you have enough that can give you a perspective on the person. Or the type of people, right? Or the audience that you're looking for. But you can't get too granular on that.
For us, it's definitely aspirational because we're trying to take these different brands that are similar and try to merge them together and see what are the similarities and figure out from our consumers what do they want. So we're hopeful to get there.
So before we talk about future state and predictions, the last question I had down here was management buy-in, senior level buy-in, getting your culture on board behind this, data personalization story, that bridge that we've been talking about. For you, it sounds like that's going to be a slog. How are you doing?
Actually not. They are all in.
Okay.
100%. They realize with this, basically the buying spree that they went on in the past 2 years, that this is something that has to happen. So from leadership perspective, from our president and chairman down, they're 100% all in.
Okay.
And I could say that's rare to kind of walk into this situation.
Yeah, I would
You
say
guys?
the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where everyone's on
100%.
board at
Yeah,
this point.
everybody- yeah. Yeah, maybe it took a couple of years to get that momentum going, but now I don't see a way to slow down.
Ditto, and loaded up with impatience about why it's taking so
Yeah.
long. Right?
Yes,
That's right.
100%.
It's that Staples commercial
Yeah.
with the easy button,
Yeah.
right? You know?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So we have a couple minutes left. I'd be curious to get your perspectives on where this all goes from. Again, getting down to that personalized level of engagement, whether it's content, whether it's media, how the compliance environment changes or adjusts. Want to hear where you think we're going here.
Yeah, I think it's been an opportunity and kind of a forcing function for us to think about what our product really is, because the product isn't AM or FM on a dial on your car. Like, I don't think my kids would know how to operate one of those. What it really is companionship and curation and special relationships with talent and those sorts of things. And localization. We're local in 160 cities, and that's really kind of the product. And that's some pretty broad boundaries to operate within.
Yep.
So I think you will see the boundaries in our world, in the audio world, blur between podcasts and broadcasts and streams. And I think eventually everybody's going to have personalized, individualized content that's mashed up in the way that you want it mashed up and delivered on whatever time scale you want to listen to it. I think the idea of synchronous broadcasting may be less common, but I think there are situations where you want to interact and listen in real time, and there are situations where you want to sit back and listen to content that's thoughtful and deep and was recorded previously, and sort of who cares what the timing of that was. And I think it's going to be something like that.
Do you see that same ideal state in all kind of channels and forms of media?
Yeah, I see it. I see it going in that direction. I think it's going to take a while in the broadcast world, but you can start to see that transformation that is starting to happen where broadcast is becoming more digital. It's becoming more streamed, and when you see that pivot in the app. So I do see that path happening. It's just going to take a little bit longer in the broadcast world for them
Right.
to adapt to it.
And do those, in terms of how you're engaging at a personalized level, whatever that means, how granular you can get, will it be the same across the board, or
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, think about some of the ways the apps are really coming to individualize, whether it's like Hulu and how they're really adding and Netflix, how they're really adding the content and learning more about you, and they're optimizing it so that the content that they're displaying is around you. But those are certain channels, right? Try to take that into a broadcast. It's still many Americans have, cable TV that
Sure.
they're consuming, right? So the set-top boxes are now becoming more digital, and you can be watching something in one TV in one room different than another TV in another, and your messaging will be different now, even if it's on the same channel. So that is starting to take hold and take place. So that's going to be a transformation there. I don't know if that's going to happen in enough time before everything becomes an app. So it's an interesting back and forth from the cable in a box to an app on the TV. But that journey will be interesting.
Any other future state predictions before we
Yeah,
go?
I think the one other piece I'll add to that is, we hadn't really talked about it. I'm going to throw out cryptocurrency, and you think about the content, right?
Sure.
And all these creators that are creating the content, and whether it's an individual content and it's a blog that I'm creating, how is that world going to tie together so that I get compensated for my content? I think there's still a play in that. I don't know where that is in the horizon, but there's going to be a play there.
Yep. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Kate, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And definitely, as you mentioned, that decay of the traditional broadcast and cable, and everyone kind of just moving more to streaming is going to be more and more, and particularly for us in the media and publishing areas. We've already made that switch between being totally digital and still being hybrid, where we're still doing some print media. It's going to be interesting for us to see for some of our brands when we're going to cut the cord and just move over fully to digital. For some of them we have, like Variety, we have not. So that's going to be interesting for us.
Great. Well, appreciate the three of you and sharing your thoughts. Great to
Thanks.
have you. Hopefully we'll have you back. Thanks, Anthony, wherever you are.
Thanks.